good afternoon to good morning to every participant, all the participants of this autumn school. On behalf of our Institute of Agroecology and Urban Agriculture, our institute is located in this is on the is a leading institute on agricultural sciences, specifically on agricultural ecology and sustainable use of natural resources. But my name is Olena Demyanyuk. Briefly about myself, I've been working for more than 20 years in the soil ecology area. I've identified my goal, fell in love with this topic, and I am developing it, improving it year by year. This presentation is mostly for students. I'd like to talk about what is soil, what biodiversity it contains, and what ecosystem services it provides. So soil is a very important part of natural environment. It's something that supports the life of all the biological objects in our planet. By the definition of the world famous Vernadsky, academician Vernadsky, this includes both living and not living nature, including all the microorganisms, water, animals, soil, and by its nature, soil and ecology are functionally related and genetically related. Soil was formed and it performs important ecological functions, transforming ecological factors and ecological environment. So these ecological properties of the soil is very important for conservation of natural resources, which is only possible when we conserve soil and soil cover in general. But most specialists and even scientists and public, moreover, don't have the understanding of the importance of soil in the most important function, the ecological one. Because it wasn't studied or researched properly and wasn't informed on this problem properly. Vasil Dokuchayev identified 5 key soil formation factors. That includes climate, living organisms, relief, soil age, topography, and also underlying rock, and the relations are very rough, very well determined. And now the more important factor appears, which is the human factor, the anthropogenic factor. Well, if we analyze soil, we'll see that there is a lack of the most important component that indicates of the feedback and the relation between the soil and the human. Specifically, the feedback function makes soil not just a passive but an active component of the biosphere, and it determines a number of important functions. So soil is a natural historic body that was formed on the surface of the earth crust, and is the heart of the maximum nutrient concentration. It's the fabric of life, and it's the life and humankind, thanks to its main fertility feature. It provides all the elements in the air, in plants, for the plants to be developed properly, which results in the key indication of soil quality. The importance of soil is obvious. It's both in formulated in text from ancient civilizations and in regulating documents by the UN and the international agencies and constitutions of certain countries. Soil as a resource is considered in 3 aspects. First of all, it's the main key asset in agriculture and forestry. It's the basis for our food security. It's also the main component of nature, which is makes it the basis for environmental safety, and it's a prerequisite for water, mineral, forest, and other resources, which makes it a basis for economic resilience. Modern science treats soils as the multifunctional natural systems that provide for cyclical nature of life. The role of the soil for humans is not just food production. No, it's not just in agriculture, not just the productive function as we were thinking before. Now we have a lot of indications that the soil plays an important role is in normal functioning of all the earth crusts, lithosphere, and other layers, and also also in general the earth. Ecological role of humans is also we indicate we identify two most important factors of this role. Those are global and geosynotical. The global functions are now in front of you on the slide, and the modern approach, scientific approach to study soil cover is based on the polyfunctional approach. So that's focusing on global and geosynotic dimensions. Through global functions, soils impact the containment of groundwaters, air, and also processes of wind erosion of upper layers and biospheric processes in general. Those are presented on the slide in this chart. We will next go in more details into these functions. The hydrospheric function of the soil. The most important ones are transformation of precipitation and letting it through into subsoil waters, participation in forming river runoffs, and water balance thanks to the soil's permeability capacity, influence of bioproductivity of water bodies on soil components, and soil is also absorption barrier that protects water basins from contamination, excess of pesticides, excess of other pollutants. Atmospherics or gas functions of the soil affect the evolution of the gas composition of atmosphere, resulting from gas exchange between the soil and the gas layer of the earth. Those functions include absorption and reflection of solar energy, regulating the gas regime and moisture circulation in the atmosphere due to evaporation and condensation, supply of solid matter and microorganisms into the atmosphere, mainly through wind erosion from the topsoil, absorption of certain gases and preventing them from flowing into space, regulating of a supply of greenhouse gases that we all hear, methane, CO2. That's through the mineralization of organic matter. Lithospheric functions are delivered by the surface, as we can see. We can treat this as a skin of our planet, and also the biochemical transformation factor. We also need to point here that the soil and plant cover reduces wind erosion and water erosion of the upper layer, top layer. Biospheric functions of the soil. It's an inhabitation area. It's accumulator. It's something that accumulates soil energy, and it provides organisms. It's also the protective membrane of the land, and it's an evolutionary factor. Soils are the most important components of biocenosis, and they have biogeosynotic functions that raise from a global importance of such factor as evolution of organisms and bioproductivity of land systems. Even at the level of biogeosynosis, the key factor is the productivity and the amount of living matter by a unit of area. There are functions. There are the following functions of the soil in the biogeosynosis process. Those are physical, chemical, and physicochemical. Physical factors of the soil facilitate the following ecological functions. First of all is the inhabitation area. It's the living area for small mammals, microorganisms, roots, and it's also a mechanical surface for plants to be able to stably stay vertical and resist winds. It's also a storage area for seeds and other plants that can stay in soil for prolonged amounts of time without damaging themselves. Another function is physical function is water supply to plants. Water retention and water supplies go through the functions of water exchange and water retention. The water exchange regime is also regulated by exchange of heat and exchange of water with the atmosphere. One of the chemical functions, chemically induced functions of soil, it's the source of nutrition and energy for plants and soil organisms in humus and other areas of soil. This is a critical functions because nutrient elements are extremely important for the biological products of biogeosynosis. Another function is nitrogen and protein fixation function. That includes fixation of nitrogen and producing it into organic matter. This includes association, microorganisms, and that leads to enriching the soil with nitrogen. The third function is a stimulating or inhibiting agent for a variety of biochemical processes. A lot of metabolism products of plants are accumulated in soil, and those can stimulate or inhibit activities of other plants and soil organisms. Physicochemical properties is due to its high absorption capacity. First and foremost, that's absorption of mineral and organic matter, microorganisms, enzymes, and water. This affects supply of nutrients. Absorption plays key role in forming a very important property of the soil, fermentation property, ferment producing property. There's an informational function. It's an informational system that contains constant exchange of information. And this exchange is not just with energy and nutrients, but also information about biological processes. The quickest spreading information is the temperature information, nutrient information, and soil condition informations. Those are signals that are transferred to seeds or spores to start growth. That's also in evolutionary process. The soil accumulates information about the environment, reflecting its history of development, and fixates it as certain specific soil properties or the genetic profile. Vasil Dokuchayev wrote that soil is the mirror of topography, of landscape. One more function is accumulation and the transformation of substances and energy in the biogeosynosis, or that are received by the biogeosynosis. Essentially, this is transforming residue, transforming other matter, and accumulating it into humus. Along with small microorganisms, animals, this results in neutralizing any substances that appeared in the soil from other activities, conducting the hygiene function. It's a natural absorbent. Soil is a natural absorbent, so it prevents a spread of such substances into water and other plants. When we identify the complex system of biogeosynotic functions, we can see that the soil is the prerequisite for existence of microorganisms and organisms in general in the current stage. So biogeosynosis went through a long evolution and formed a biodiversity system and the soil diversity system. Hence the seventh function, that's generation, maintenance, preservation, and facilitation of biodiversity. This is one of the most important functions of soils in the biosphere. Soil biodiversity, we can see that everywhere. We are part of it. Biodiversity is hardly quantifiable because there are numerous microorganisms and species that are covered or were not discovered yet. At the moment, the world has registered 1.9 million species of living creatures. And that's just the top of the iceberg. So soil biodiversity is the biodiversity of organisms under the soil, including their genes and the complexes, systems that they are part of. From micro areas to massive pieces of landscape. This slide indicates the scale of the biota and its diversity. Soil organisms are varied in size, from 20 nanometers to 2 centimeters by body size, and they are divided into 4 body sizes. First one is microorganisms, including viruses, bacteria, archaea, and fungi, sizing from 20 nanometers to 10 microcentimeters. Microfauna includes soil protozoa and the nematodes, 10 microcentimeters to 0.1 millimeter. They mostly live in solutions and capillary water, and they take part in taking apart residue and producing minerals. Their variety depends on microbiotopes and physical properties of the soil. The second group is mesofauna, sizing from 0.1 millimeter to 2 millimeters in body size, including mites, potworms, and small larvae. They live in air cavities, and they produce coprogenic microaggregates. They participate in transforming organic matter that is contained in soil. The third group is macrofauna, sizing from 2 millimeters to 20 millimeters. Those are big soil invertebrates, including earthworms, ants, termites, beetles, arachnids, larvae. All this biota assists in draining and aeration of the soil. Megafauna is something sizing over 20 millimeters, though it include vertebrates, including mammals, reptiles, and amphibians that result in spatial inhomogeneity of the soil.
On slide 12, we have a poster from FAO that actually illustrate the diversity of the soil. So this is a community basically that keeps our soil fertile and alive and helps us maintain the basic fundamental biochemical processes that actually make life on Earth possible. So moving on, here on the slide, you can see some pictures, some illustrations of the soil biodiversity, because soil is believed to be one of the most biodiversified environments on Earth. 1 gram of soil could contain up to 1 billion cells, including fungi and other organisms such as nematodes and worms, and even small mammals. A large portion of the soil is still yet to be explored and described. So what is the role of biodiversity? Biodiversity is a result of millions and millions of years of evolution. This is what we need to survive. Otherwise, uh, we wouldn't be able to live. We're talking about food that we're getting from our soil, some materials that we even use to make clothes and for other purposes. Biodiversity helps us have our waters clean. And just to name a few interesting factors, uh, about a quarter of the whole, say, biodiversity content lies in the soil, but we are yet to learn about what it actually is. 1 gram of healthy soil has more organisms in it than there are people on Earth. 95% of the food we eat actually comes from soil, but 33% of the soil has degraded already, and over 90% can degrade by 2050. By 2050, the population of the world will reach the 10 billion mark. And sustainable land management would actually help us produce up to 58% more food. Soil microorganisms help us restore the soil from contamination and actually help us help the soil accumulate useful nutrients. So our soil gives us a lot, but it is in grave danger due to unsustainable management practices, plowing, urbanizing, and other kinds of activities. So we're losing biodiversity, and that is a pressing concern. Here we're talking both about biodiversity of the soil and the functions that those organisms perform, because if they are out, some of the functions of the soil could be lost. In fact, the consequences could go beyond that. Somehow, biodiversity is taken for granted, is perceived as something that's always going to be there. But the reality is, it is in grave danger because of us humans and what we're doing. A lot of organisms are simply losing uh, their habitats. And on the slide, you can see just a few factors once again, including unsustainable management practices, pollution, climate change, um, urbanizing practices, and overall the degrading um, the earth or soil degradation. Now on this map, we can see potential threats to biodiversity. The data is from 2016, as we can see, and it is actually potential threat level, not actual. In other words, in those high-risk areas marked here on the map, the soil is not necessarily in that kind of danger, but we are talking here about a combination of factors that combined together pose a certain threat to the area and beyond. Just some 10 years ago, a number of initiatives was launched to preserve biodiversity. That includes international initiatives to preserve biodiversity of the soil. That was launched in 2002. Then a global initiative for soil biodiversity dated 2011, the Global Soil Partnership 2012, Global Atlas of Soil Biodiversity by the European Commission dated 2016. So basically, we're talking about an alternative to approaching the global threats, and not just as some say scientific venue for exploration, because ultimately we are talking about preservation of life on our planet. Let's talk about the contribution of soil and the services it provides for the ecosystem. So basically here we're talking about the benefits that we as community can obtain. So according to FAO, there are 11 items on this list, including food, including climate regulations, provision of fiber, provision of raw material for pharmaceuticals, carbon sequestration, cultural heritage, and others, as you can see on this slide. So the role of the soil and the biota and the impact on the ecosystem are illustrated on my slide here that you can see on the screen. We're talking about mixed landscapes here. Now, moving on, the role of the soil can be broken into four main categories. Regulating, we're talking about regulation, providing habitat, then there's production and information. So there are certain biological processes that are fundamental to our life. We need to maintain a certain habitat, a certain environment for the biota, so that that biota could help us preserve our biodiversity. There's a number of functions that the soil performs, including those related to microbiota. Overall, it contributes to the well-being of the humans through better cognitive development, through aesthetic enjoyment, and other things considered. So the value of the soil can be broken down into economic, environmental, or ecological, and socio-cultural. Regarding economy and environment, I think it's pretty self-explanatory. Now, socio-cultural, the socio-cultural element stands for, among other things, the impact on mental, on physical health, on the human liberties, ultimately. Now, regarding the environment, here we're talking about the regulation of the soil and other parameters associated with the biodiversity, with the composition of the soil and such. So when we're talking about the social part of the soil value, we're also talking about the services provided by it and through it. Now, this chart on the right serves to illustrate what I've just explained. So we have different needs, such as physical, I mean, we have different properties of the soil, such as physical, chemical, biological, mineral related and such. And there are certain needs of humans. Remember that pyramid, the Maslow pyramid? So we have needs, physiological and others. So here on the slide, you can see some services for the people and for other organisms, not just including different regulation services, but also supporting services as well. Those green arrows, they actually point to the connections between these elements and to the transformation of the elements into the services. Finally, we have the social capital that is also determined by the properties of the soil. Regarding the ecosystem services, I have some numbers here on the slide converted into, say, billions of dollars, US dollars, because it is somehow easier for us to perceive. This was an attempt taken to try and measure the natural capital and the services provided in money terms. The various research, the research has been carried out, giving us better understanding and adjustment of the value of these services, which measures as 52.5 billion US dollars. So this is in money terms what nature is providing us with. But the authors of that research, of that article, claim that this number actually fails to accurately convey that value, somehow understating it. So it could be much, much higher, in other words. Bottom line is that nature actually underlines any kind of economic activity, and the total value here could amount to 125 billion US dollars. The overall contribution could be measured as 11 $0.3 billion dollars, US dollars, which again could be an underestimation. And what we have been observing is the tendency towards, say, these services becoming a deficit, which makes this capital, to be in even more demand. So we have this natural capital, we have soil, and the cost of services of the soil microbiota could actually exceed 1.5 billion US dollars per year, including processing over 3,800 million tons of waste, pests elimination, pollination, and other services. So just to compare, in table 2, we have the GDP of the United States, global GDP, production of wheat, maize, and cotton. And you can see that you can actually compare it for yourself, the value of the ecosystem services that the soil is providing us with. So moving on, I would like to talk a little bit about the Sustainable Development Goals and biodiversity. Living in a globalized world uh, in 2022, we depend not just on the management practices, but also on how the community perceives this effort. The UN has identified 17 sustainable development goals, including protection of the environment, uh, promotion of the well-being of the people. It is also known as the Agenda, uh, I think, 2020. So there are certain challenges that the humanity is facing and certain objectives related to the ecosystem services, including food safety, human health, soil remediation, water safety, climate change, biodiversity protection, and others. So all of this is either directly or indirectly related to those objectives of sustainable development that can be achieved through soil management. If we are striving to, say, overcome poverty, this could be interpreted as follows. In rural areas, house income per household could actually be increased through land management, and different communities require different approaches to management, including land management. So we need to know our soil in each particular region if we want to achieve our goals, such as, for example, to improve proceeds from farming and the income of the related households and individuals. Now, overcoming hunger. If we want to overcome hunger, we need to maintain our soils in proper condition and manage it wisely. That would also give us better quality of food, and that would actually make our food safer and more accessible for the population on, of our planet. It would also give us more food ultimately. Now, strengthening health and promoting well-being. Our health and well-being depend on the quality of the soil that we are living on. And if we want to produce safe, high-quality food, and we need to uh, make sure that our soil is healthy. And as humans, we would also be helped as part of the biosinosis. Now, clean water and proper sanitary conditions. Our soil is the key element in terms of water circulation, and we've already spoken about that. So most for the most part, the quality of our water depends on the quality of our soil. And it can be the barrier, the soil, I mean, can be the barrier for making our water clean, I mean, fresh water, and keep it in proper condition. Now, clean energy. Using better soil, more productive soil for the cultivation of specific crops would, in a way, help us manage our energy sources better. So we need to manage our land wisely. We need to be responsible in terms of these transformations, in terms of growing our food, and in terms of, say, cultivating energy crops. Now, onto culture. The soil that we are using is actually being used as the basis for production, which in turns drives economic growth and development. Now that was economy. So now the development of communities. certain certain plants, certain crops help us maintain our areas, urban and rural, in a certain, say, shape. So we can create certain environments in our cities, for example, including through management of city gardens. Now, responsible consumption and production. If we consume less water and less power through, for example, fewer losses, by cutting basically our losses in different stages of production, that would help us achieve this goal. Now, overcoming the impact of climate change. We know that soil is one of the biggest, if not the biggest, source of carbon on Earth, and it plays a great role, maybe the key role, in its circulation in the turnover. And of course, that is associated with the climate change, and it would also require specific technologies for soil management and low carbon agro technology approach in general. Now, goal 15 is basically based on sustainable soil management, on making our ecosystems uh, more effective, including by supporting the diverse biodiversity of the microbiota. So, well-being of us as people living in Earth, our well-being, I mean, cannot be viewed separately. It is part of a bigger picture that requires a comprehensive approach. So the world is learning to perceive the soil as a critical resource, economic resource. It's not just some substrate that you can use wherever you need it, however you need it. It is actually a living environment that lives by certain laws. It takes centuries to remediate just 1 centimeter of the soil, and our soil gives us 95% of our food, as we've just discussed. The soil actually participates in the regulation of our water cycle and other cycles, heat cycles. It impacts our energy production and consumption, and it helps us maintain our biodiversity in general, plus the social functions that ultimately all contribute to our well-being. So in this lecture, I was trying to explain the critical role that the soil plays in our life. So to wrap up, I would like to say a few words about the role of the soil as the key component and precondition for our well-being. Academician Moiseyev said that the soil plays a key role in our biota on land, and of course, it is one of the fundamental elements of the biosphere and the key to successful being of us as a humanity. So protecting our soil should be one of our main tasks for the future. Thank you so much. Thank you, Olena, for the great presentation. Let me facilitate this part. We seem to have just 1 minute left for the questions and answers. So if you could just be concise in your reply. And we have a question about the most probable theory of humus formation. What is it in your understanding? Well, we all know that humus is a complex organic matter that is associated with complex biochemical processes that is dependent on living organisms and their ability to transform um, different kinds of matter. So we know about the mineralization theory and other theories. So my answer would basically be to just read up and learn more, and you will find your answer. But according to FAO, we are using 24 billion tons of fertile soil every year globally. Just let that sink in. Those are some awful numbers. And 3.2 billion people are actually affected by this degradation through food shortages, for example. Also, when I was going through the literature, I came across this piece that said that FAO estimates the losses to equal $1 billion per year. Just think about it for a moment. We should really reconsider our approach to soil management altogether, and this including the services that it provides us. If we don't want to be homeless barbarians, we really need to think about it carefully. Thank you so much, Olena, for the insightful lecture. I do have a few questions of my own, but I hope that we will have more time for that a bit later when we have the discussion.